The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Within 24 hours of the Council's emergency session, every inhabited world knew the truth. Humans were not the weak newcomers they appeared to be. They were the descendants of the precursors, inheritors of technology and knowledge that predated galactic civilization itself. The reactions were immediate and varied. On Earth, Jiwoo stood in the excavation site, watching as more structures emerged from the sand. The dig had expanded rapidly, with crews working around the clock. Every hour brought new discoveries, new evidence of the precursors' advanced society, but it also brought new concerns. "We found 3 more caches," his assistant reported, showing him a holographic map. One in what used to be the Amazon, another under the Antarctic ice, and a third beneath the Pacific Ocean. The readings matched the Sahara site exactly. "How many do we think there are total?" Jiwoo asked. "Hundreds, maybe thousands. They're scattered across every continent, hidden in places that would take millennia for human civilization to reach naturally." The precursors were thorough. In orbit above Earth, Admiral Kyung-soo commanded the human defense fleet from the bridge of his flagship. He was a career military officer, older than Taeyang but cut from the same cloth. His ships had just received a priority transmission from the Council, and what it contained made his blood run cold. "Show me the readings again," he ordered. The tactical display lit up with sensor data from the edge of known space. Something was moving in the dark between galaxies, something massive. The energy signatures didn't match anything in the databases, but they set off every warning system designed to detect threats. "How long until it reaches us?" Kyung-soo asked. "Unknown, Admiral. The readings are distorted by distance and whatever the object is using for propulsion. Best estimate puts first contact anywhere from 6 months to 2 years. "Not enough time," Kyung-soo muttered. "Even if we activate every precursor cache on Earth, we won't have time to integrate the technology into our defenses." His communication officer looked up from her station. "Sir, we're receiving reports of similar readings from multiple vectors. Whatever's coming, it's not alone." Back on Omega Threshold, Taeyang stood in what had become his command center. The sword rested on a stand nearby, its glow never fading. Maps and data streams filled the air around him, showing the locations of activated precursor sites. More appeared every hour as humans across the galaxy felt the genetic triggers activate in their minds. Hana burst into the room, her usual composed demeanor cracked by urgency. "We have a problem. Actually, several problems, but one is immediate. Tell me." "The Dominion has made their move. They've blockaded 3 human colonies in the Outer Rim and are demanding we turn over all precursor technology to them for safekeeping." The Dominion was a militaristic empire that controlled dozens of systems. They had always been aggressive, always pushing at borders and testing limits. The news about humanity's true nature had clearly threatened their position as one of the galaxy's dominant powers. "How many ships?" Taeyang asked. 50 warships, including 3 dreadnoughts. They're not making subtle threats." Before Taeyang could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. Dongmin rushed in, weapon drawn. "Sir, we have intruders. Multiple breach points. They're heading for this section." Taeyang grabbed the sword without thinking. The moment his hand closed around the grip, information flooded his mind. He could sense the intruders, feel their positions throughout the station like points of heat in his awareness. The sword was connected to the station's ancient systems, and those systems were now connected to him. "Assassins," he said, "hired by someone on the Council. They want the sword." "How do you know?" Hana asked. "The station is telling me. Or the sword is. I'm not sure anymore where one ends and the other begins." Explosions rocked the corridor outside. Dongmin took position by the door, but Taeyang waved him back. "They're not going to make it this far." He closed his eyes, focusing on the connection between himself and the ancient systems. The station had been built by the precursors, incorporated around structures they had left behind. Those structures were responding to his presence, awakening after 50,000 years of dormancy. Throughout Omega Threshold, defensive systems came online. Energy barriers materialized in corridors, cutting off the assassins' advance. Automated weapon platforms emerged from walls, targeting intruders with precision that left station personnel untouched. Within minutes, the threat was neutralized. "Impossible!" Brixtal's voice came over the communication system. "Those defenses have never worked. We tried to activate them when the station was first built. They ignored every command." "They weren't listening to you," Taeyang replied. They were waiting for someone with precursor genetics to give them orders. The implications of that statement sent ripples through the council. If humans could control the station's hidden defenses, what else could they control? How much precursor technology was scattered throughout the galaxy, waiting for the right genetic key to activate it? Velmora arrived at the command center an hour later, her compound eyes reflecting concern. Ambassador, we need to discuss the situation. The galaxy is on the edge of panic. Some species view humanity as their salvation. Others see you as a threat that must be eliminated before you grow too powerful. And which are you? Taeyang asked. I am a scholar. I seek truth. And the truth is that you hold power no one fully understands, including yourself. That makes people afraid. I'm afraid too, Taeyang admitted. Every hour more memories surface. I know things I shouldn't know. I can do things that should be impossible. The sword isn't just a weapon, Velmora. It's changing me. Or maybe revealing what was always there, buried in my genetics. Hana pulled up a new hologram, this one showing star charts. We've been analyzing the data from Admiral Kyung-soo's scans. The objects approaching from dark space match descriptions in the precursor memory files. They're not ships in the conventional sense. They're more like mobile anomalies, tiers in reality that move with purpose. The enemy, Taeyang said quietly. Yes. And they're not alone. We're detecting smaller disturbances throughout the galaxy, like scouts or advance forces probing our defenses. Elder Crix's voice crackled over the communication system. I have consulted the oldest records in our archives. There are references to a time before the Council, a period of darkness that the founding species barely survived. They spoke of entities that consumed light itself, that fed on civilization and left only void in their wake. Did they say how they survived? Taeyang asked. They didn't. The records say they were saved by those who came before, by a civilization that sacrificed itself to drive back the darkness. The old being paused. By the precursors. The pieces were falling into place, painting a picture that was both terrifying and oddly hopeful. The precursors hadn't just hidden from their enemy. They had fought a holding action, buying time for the other species of the galaxy to develop, to grow strong enough to face the threat themselves. And they had left behind the tools that would be needed when the darkness returned. We need to make a decision, Brixtal said, his pride clearly warring with pragmatism. The Dominion's blockade is just the beginning. If we don't present a united front, the galaxy will tear itself apart before the real enemy arrives. What do you propose? Taeyang asked. An alliance. A true one. Not the political arrangement we've had for the past 10,000 years. We share resources, technology, knowledge. Humans activate the precursor caches and share what they find. In return, the rest of the galaxy provides the industrial base and manpower to use it. And who leads this alliance? Velmora asked pointedly. Silence fell over the channel. It was the question everyone had been avoiding. Traditionally, the Council operated by consensus among the strongest species, but this situation was unprecedented. Humans now held the keys to technology that could change everything, but they were still outnumbered and outgunned by the older civilizations. A joint command, Hana suggested, human specialists to interface with precursor technology, but military and logistical leadership drawn from experienced officers of all species. The Dominion won't accept that, Brixtal said. They'll see it as humans holding power over everyone else. Then they'll have to be convinced. Kyung-soo's voice joined the conversation. His hologram appeared, showing him on his flagship's bridge. Admiral, I'm breaking the blockade at the Outer Rim colonies. My ships have just integrated the first precursor weapon systems. The Dominion's about to learn that the galaxy's power balance has shifted. Admiral, wait, Taeyang started to say, but Kyung-soo had already ended the transmission. On the edge of human space, the confrontation was brief and decisive. When the Dominion fleet moved to intercept Kyung-soo's ships, they found themselves facing weapons they had never encountered before. Energy beams that bent space itself, missiles that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, shields that absorbed attacks and redirected them back at their sources. The Dominion dreadnoughts, pride of their empire, were disabled in minutes without a single shot hitting the human fleet. The message was clear to everyone watching. Humanity had inherited more than just knowledge. They had inherited the power to reshape the galaxy's military hierarchy. The council chambers 3 hours later were nothing like the ceremonial gathering from before. Emergency protocols had been activated, and the Grand Assembly Hall was now sealed and shielded. Only senior delegates and essential personnel were allowed inside. Tae-Yang sat at a table near the center, the sword resting across his lap. It hadn't left his grip since the Chamber of Trials, and he found he didn't want to put it down. It felt right in his hands, like it belonged there. Hana was at a nearby console, coordinating with someone via quantum communication. Her expression was intense, focused in a way Tae-Yang had rarely seen. When she finally ended the call, she looked exhausted but excited. "That was Jiwoo," she said, referring to Earth's chief archaeologist. "I sent him all our data from the sword, and he's been cross-referencing it with recent discoveries. Tae-Yang, we need to show them what we found." Brixtel sat across from them, no longer the confident chancellor but a leader facing something beyond his understanding. Bellamora was there too, along with Elder Crix and a dozen other senior council members. They all watched as Hana set up a holographic display. 3 months ago, Hana began, we uncovered a site in what used to be called the Sahara Desert on Earth. The dig went deeper than any before it, down through layers of sediment that hadn't been disturbed in 50,000 years. What we found changed everything we thought we knew about human history. The hologram showed images of an excavation site. Ancient structures emerged from the sand, their architecture unlike anything from known human civilizations. The buildings were made from the same dark material as the walls of the Chamber of Trials. "We found weapons," Hana continued. "Tools, machinery, all crafted with technology that shouldn't have existed 50,000 years ago. And we found writing." She zoomed in on a wall covered in symbols. "These runes are identical to the ones on the sword." Velmora leaned forward, her antennae twitching with agitation. "This is impossible. Human civilization is young. Your oldest cities are barely 10,000 years old." "Our current civilization, yes," Hana agreed. "But these finds suggest there was something before. Something that was deliberately buried and forgotten." Jiwoo's image appeared in the hologram, transmitted in real time from Earth. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, but his eyes blazed with the fire of discovery. "We've completed the analysis," he said without preamble. "The metallurgy of the artifacts matches the sword's composition exactly. Same alloys, same manufacturing techniques, same energy signatures in the molecular structure. But here's what's really important." He brought up a new image, a complex genetic chart. "We've been mapping human DNA for centuries, and there's always been sections we didn't understand. Junk DNA, we called it. Sequences that seem to serve no purpose. Except it turns out they do serve a purpose. We just didn't have the right key to unlock them." "What kind of purpose?" Elder Crix asked, his ancient voice crackling with interest. "Information storage," Jiwoo replied. "Compressed data encoded directly into our genetic structure. When we used the energy signature from the sword as a decryption key, the sequences revealed themselves. They contained technical specifications, historical records, even navigation charts. The entire knowledge base of an advanced civilization, preserved in the DNA of their descendants." The room was silent as the implications washed over them. Tae-Yang felt the sword grow warm in his hands as if responding to the revelation. The information flowing into his mind made more sense now. It wasn't telepathy or magic. The sword was triggering genetic memory, activating knowledge that had been locked away in his cells for 50,000 years. "So it's true," Brixtal said slowly. "Humans are the precursors, or at least their descendants." "Not exactly," Hana corrected gently. "Based on what we're learning, the precursors were the ancestors of humanity. 50,000 years ago, they were at the height of their civilization. They had technology that makes our current galactic standard look primitive. They built structures across this galaxy and others, and then something happened. They encountered a threat," Tae-Yang said, the words coming to him from the sword's stored memories. "Something from outside known space. An enemy that couldn't be defeated with conventional means." "What kind of enemy?" Belmora asked. Images formed in Tae-Yang's mind, but they were fragmentary, incomplete. He tried to put them into words. "Something old. Something that consumes civilizations. The precursors called them..." He struggled for the translation. "The term doesn't exist in modern languages. The closest would be entropy made conscious. They're forces of decay and destruction given form and purpose." Elder Crix's mechanical hands gripped the table edge. "I remember stories from my youth. Warnings about darkness between the stars. I thought they were just tales to frighten children." "They were warnings," Tae-Yang said. "The precursors fought this enemy for generations. They won battles but couldn't win the war. So they made a choice. They would hide, reduce their profile, become so small and insignificant that the enemy would pass them by. They took their greatest technologies and buried them. They reduced their population and retreated to a single world. Earth, Hana whispered. Yes, they went to Earth and let their civilization fall. They became primitive again, hunter-gatherers starting from scratch, all to avoid detection by their enemy, and they encoded their knowledge into their genetics, a time lock that would only open when it was safe, when enough time had passed. How much time? Brixtal demanded. 50,000 years, Praxis 9's voice echoed through the chamber. The AI had linked into the Council systems. That was the duration specified by the original precursors. Enough time for the enemy to pass by to forget this galaxy existed. But why leave the sword? Velmora asked. Why leave any technology at all if they were trying to hide? Taeyang stood lifting the blade so it caught the light. The runes glowed brighter, responding to the attention. Because they knew the enemy might come back. They knew that their descendants might need weapons when they couldn't hide anymore. This sword is a key, like Jiwoo said. It unlocks the rest of the hidden technology, activates the dormant systems they left scattered across the galaxy. He closed his eyes, letting the information flow more freely. There are caches everywhere. On dead worlds, inside asteroid fields, hidden in the cores of planets. Weapons, ships, defenses. Everything needed to fight a war against an enemy that exists beyond normal space and time. The precursors left it all behind, waiting for the day when their children would be ready to use it. And you think that day is now? Brixtal asked. I think the 50,000-year timer expired for a reason. The sword was set to become accessible at a specific time. That time is now. Taeyang opened his eyes. The enemy is coming back. The room erupted in argument. Some delegates refused to believe it. Others demanded proof. Still others wanted to begin immediate preparations for a threat they didn't understand. Through it all, Taeyang remained standing, the sword in his hands, feeling the weight of inherited responsibility. Hana moved to his side. Are you okay? She asked quietly. I don't know, he admitted. I have memories that aren't mine. I know things I never learned. And I keep seeing images of what's coming. He looked at her, and she saw fear in his eyes for the first time since she'd known him. Hana, if what I'm seeing is true, if these memories are accurate, then the galaxy isn't ready for what's coming. Nothing we have can stop it. But the precursor technology can, maybe if we can activate it. If we can figure out how to use it before the enemy arrives. The sword is just the first key. There are others scattered across human populations, genetic triggers that will activate in people when the time is right. He laughed without humor. We always wondered why humans seem to have such varied talents, such diverse abilities. It's because we carry the full spectrum of precursor genetics. We're not just their descendants. We're their backup plan. Elder Crix approached them, moving slowly but with purpose. When I was young, barely a century old, my mentor told me something I never forgot. He said that humans would either save the galaxy or doom it, and that we wouldn't know which until it was too late to choose differently. I thought he was being dramatic. Now I wonder if he knew something the rest of us didn't. What do we do? Velmora asked. She had been listening quietly, her compound eyes reflecting the sword's light. If this threat is real, if humans truly are the key to stopping it, how do we proceed? Taeyang looked around the chamber at the assembled delegates. Species that had looked down on humanity hours ago now watched him with a mixture of hope and fear. The galaxy's power structure had shifted in the span of a single day, and everyone was struggling to adapt. We prepare, he said firmly. We locate the hidden caches. We activate the dormant technology. We train people to use weapons and tools that have been buried for 50,000 years. And we hope that the precursor's plan was good enough, because if it isn't, none of us will survive what's coming. The sword pulsed in his hands, warm and alive. A bridge between the ancient past and the uncertain future. Outside the station, the stars continued their slow dance through the void, unaware that the peace they had known for 50 millennia was about to end. The silence in the chamber lasted only a moment before it shattered into chaos. Delegates surged forward, shouting questions and demands in a dozen different languages. Security systems activated automatically, projecting barriers of light to keep the crowd from overwhelming the center of the chamber. Taeyang stood in the eye of the storm, still holding the sword, watching the blue light dance along its blade. This is a trick. Brixtal's voice boomed over the noise. The Chancellor pushed his way through the crowd, his scaled face twisted with anger and confusion. Some human deception. The sword cannot be lifted. 50,000 years of evidence proves this. Praxis 9's holographic form flickered, its geometric pattern spinning rapidly as if the AI itself was struggling to process what had happened. There is no deception, Chancellor. My sensors confirm what your eyes tell you. The human holds the sword. The blade has accepted him. Accepted? Bellamora's musical voice cut through the noise. The insectoid scholar moved closer, her compound eyes fixed on the weapon. What does that mean, Praxis 9? In all your records, has this ever happened before? Once, the AI replied. 50,000 years ago, when the sword was first placed here. The one who placed it lifted it as easily as Ambassador Taeyang does now. Then they set it down and walked away. I was instructed to guard it until one came who could lift it again. Hana was at Taeyang's side now, her scholarly excitement overriding any sense of caution. May I examine it? She asked him. Not touch it, just look closer. Taeyang nodded, still feeling strange. The sword seemed to hum in his grip, and information continued to flow into his mind in ways he couldn't fully explain. It wasn't words exactly, more like understanding arriving fully formed, knowledge that had always been there but was only now being remembered. Hana pulled out a portable scanner and ran it over the blade's surface. Her eyes widened as she read the results. The material is unknown to our databases. The energy signature is off the scale. And these runes, they're definitely similar to markings found on Earth, but the language... She looked up at him with something like wonder in her eyes. Taeyang, I think this is a precursor to all known written languages. This might be the original form from which all galactic writing systems descended. That's impossible, Brixtal snapped, but his voice lacked conviction. Earth is a young world. Humans are newcomers. You cannot claim connection to something this ancient. I'm not claiming anything, Taeyang said quietly. The strange sensations were beginning to settle, the flow of information slowing to a manageable stream. I'm just holding a sword. But Chancellor, you're right that something doesn't add up here. He looked down at the weapon in his hands. Now that the initial shock had passed, he could examine it more carefully. The design was elegant but practical, made for actual use rather than ceremony. The balance was perfect, the edge sharp enough to split atoms if he wanted it to. And there was something else, something in the way it felt against his palm. I've held swords before, he said slowly, in training, in museums, replicas, and real ones. This feels like them, not alien, not strange, just familiar. Dongmin had pushed through the crowd to stand guard nearby. Sir, with respect, we should secure this area. There are protocols for discoveries of this magnitude. Protocols? Brixtal's laugh was harsh. Your species has been in space for barely a century. Don't speak to us about protocols for ancient artifacts. And yet, Belmora said softly, it is a human who holds the artifact now. Perhaps we should listen to what he has to say. The crowd had settled somewhat, though tension still crackled in the air. Delegates watched from behind the light barriers, their expressions ranging from hostile to fascinated. Taeyang could feel the weight of their attention, and not just metaphorically. The sword seemed to respond to it, growing slightly warmer in his grip. Praxis 9, he said, you mentioned someone placed the sword here 50,000 years ago. Do your records show what they looked like? The AI's form stabilized, its patterns aligning into something more orderly. I can display the image. A hologram appeared in the air beside them, showing a figure in ancient armor placing the sword on the pedestal. The resolution was imperfect after so much time, but the basic shape was clear. The figure was humanoid. 2 arms, 2 legs, upright posture. The armor obscured details, but the proportions were unmistakably similar to human anatomy. That proves nothing, Brixtal said, but his voice was quieter now. Many species share similar forms. True, Hana agreed, her fingers flying over her datapad. But look at the armor design. The joint placement, the way the helmet is shaped. I can pull up examples from Earth archaeology. She projected her own hologram, showing ancient armor fragments found in dig sites across the human homeworld. The similarity was striking. Coincidence, the Chancellor insisted. Maybe, Taeyang said, or maybe not. Praxis 9, what were your instructions exactly? What did the original holder tell you? The AI paused, and for a moment Taeyang thought it wouldn't answer. Then it spoke, its voice carrying a weight of ages. They told me to guard the sword until one of the inheritors returned. They said that their people were leaving, going into hiding for reasons I was not told. They said that one day, when the time was right, someone would come who could lift the blade again. That person would need it for what was coming. What was coming? Velmora asked. What did they mean? I do not know. They did not say. A new voice joined the conversation, old and crackling with age. But I might know. Everyone turned to see a figure making its way slowly through the crowd. Elder Crix was so old that no one knew exactly what species he belonged to anymore. His body was a patchwork of cybernetic replacements, keeping him alive long past his natural span. He was treated with reverence by the Council, one of the few beings who could remember events from thousands of years ago. Elder, Brixtal said, bowing his head slightly, you honor us with your presence. Crix waved away the formality with one mechanical hand. His eyes, still organic, focused on Tae Yang and the sword. I was young when I first heard the stories. Tales passed down from the founding of the Council. There were references to a great civilization that came before, a people who seeded the galaxy with technology and then vanished without explanation. The precursors, Hana breathed. It's a common legend, but most historians consider it myth. Perhaps not as mythical as we thought, Crix said. He shuffled closer, studying the sword with evident interest. I have seen many things in my long life, but I never expected to see this. If the human can lift the blade, then perhaps the old stories were true. Perhaps the precursors were real, and perhaps... He paused, his gaze shifting to meet Tae Yang's eyes. Perhaps humans are their descendants. The chamber erupted again, but this time the noise was different. Not angry disbelief, but shocked speculation. Could it be true? Could the weakest species in the Council actually be the inheritors of the galaxy's greatest mystery? Tae Yang felt the sword pulse in his hand, almost like it was responding to the conversation. More information flooded his mind, fragments of memory that weren't his own. He saw stars he'd never visited, worlds he'd never known, battles fought in the depths of space against things that had no name in any current language. I don't understand all of this, he said, his voice cutting through the noise. But I know one thing. This sword recognizes something in me, something in my genetic code or my neural structure or whatever it uses to judge worthiness. And if Elder Crix is right, if humans really are connected to the precursors, then we need to figure out why they left this here. They didn't just abandon a weapon. They left a message. What kind of message? Dongmin asked. Tae Yang looked at the blade, at the runes that now seemed less mysterious than they had before. A warning, he said softly. And instructions. Something is coming. Something that made the most advanced civilization in galactic history go into hiding. He raised his eyes to meet the stares of the assembled delegates. And they left this behind so that when that something arrived, we'd have a chance to fight back. The chamber fell silent again as the implications sank in. The sword, the trial, the 50,000 years of waiting, all of it suddenly took on a darker significance. This wasn't just about ancient mysteries or galactic politics anymore. This was about survival. The Chamber of Trials lay deep within the heart of Omega Threshold, accessible only through a series of descending corridors that grew older and stranger the farther one traveled. Tai Yang walked these passages with Hana and Dongmin, his security officer, while behind them came a growing crowd of delegates eager to witness the spectacle. The walls changed as they descended. The clean, modern surfaces of the upper station gave way to something else, something ancient. The material itself seemed different, darker and smoother than anything currently produced by galactic civilizations. It absorbed light rather than reflecting it, and strange symbols marked the surfaces at regular intervals. This section predates the Council, Hana explained. Her voice hushed despite the chatter from the crowd behind them. When the founding species discovered this location, these chambers already existed. No one knows who built them or why. The station was constructed around them. Dongmin kept his hand near his sidearm, though what good a weapon would do in these circumstances was unclear. He was young for a security officer, but his instincts were sharp. Feels wrong down here, he muttered. Like we're being watched. We are, said a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The corridor opened into a vast chamber that stole the breath from every observer. The space was impossible by any standard of architecture. It stretched upward into darkness that no light could penetrate, and the walls curved away into distances that shouldn't have fit within the station's known dimensions. The floor was smooth and black, reflecting the forms of visitors like dark water. In the center of the chamber, a pedestal rose from the floor. On that pedestal lay a sword. Even from a distance, Taeyang could see the weapon clearly. It was crafted from a black material that seemed to drink in light, its blade straight and simple in design. No elaborate crossguard, no ornate pommel, just a long blade and a wrapped handle, elegant in its simplicity. Runes covered the blade's surface, glowing with a faint blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. "I am Praxis 9, the voice spoke again, and now Taeyang could see its source. A figure materialized near the pedestal, humanoid in shape but composed entirely of light and geometric patterns. An artificial intelligence ancient beyond measure. "I am the guardian of this chamber and keeper of its records." The crowd of delegates spread out along the chamber's edges, maintaining a respectful distance from the center. Taeyang noticed that even Brixtal seemed subdued in this place, his earlier confidence replaced by something closer to wariness. 50,000 years, Praxis 9 continued, its voice carrying effortlessly through the space. "That is how long I have maintained this chamber. In that time, 147,000 beings have attempted to lift the sword of Kael'thas. All have failed." As the AI spoke, the walls came alive with images. Holographic recordings played out around them, showing attempt after attempt. Taeyang saw beings of incredible size and obvious strength approach the sword. He watched them strain and struggle, their bodies radiating power that made the air shimmer. None of them could move the blade even slightly. One recording showed a crystalline giant whose mere footsteps cracked the chamber floor. The being grasped the sword with hands that could crush diamonds, and pulled with force enough to tear a building from its foundation. The sword remained perfectly still. Another showed a creature of pure energy, formless and vast, attempting to manipulate the weapon with fields of force that bent space itself. The sword sat undisturbed on its pedestal, as immovable as a mountain. "The sword does not measure strength," Praxis 9 said. "That much is clear. But what it does measure remains unknown. Worthiness, some say. Destiny, claim others. I have seen the noble and the corrupt attempt it. I have seen the wise and the foolish, the brave and the cowardly, warriors and scholars, leaders and servants. The sword judges them all equally and finds them all wanting." Hana moved closer to Taeyang, her datapad forgotten in her hands. "The runes on the blade," she said softly. "I've seen similar markings before in archaeological sites on Earth. I never thought much of it, assumed it was coincidence or convergent design. But now, Taeyang prompted, "now I'm not so sure. The age matches. 50,000 years ago, something happened on Earth. A gap in the archaeological record, a time when advanced tools suddenly appeared and then vanished. We've never understood it." Around them, the delegates were taking their positions. Brixtal stood with several other chancellors, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and smug anticipation. Filmora remained apart from the others, her insectoid features unreadable but her attention focused entirely on Taeyang. "Ambassador Taeyang of Earth," Praxis 9 addressed him directly. "You wish to attempt the trial?" "I do," Taeyang replied, stepping forward. "Be aware that the sword has never harmed any who touched it. The trial is one of ability, not survival. Do you understand?" "I understand." "Then approach." Taeyang walked toward the pedestal. Each step echoed in the vast chamber despite the crowd of observers. He was aware of their eyes on him, aware of their expectations. They expected him to fail, of course. The human would grasp the sword, strain against its weight, and eventually give up in embarrassment. It would confirm everything they already believed about his species. Dongmin moved to follow, but Taeyang gestured for him to stay back. This was something he needed to do alone. The sword grew larger as he approached, or perhaps it was just his perception changing. Up close, he could see details invisible from a distance. The runes that covered the blade weren't just decorative. They formed patterns, mathematical sequences that his mind struggled to process. They seemed to shift and change when he wasn't looking directly at them, as if the symbols existed in more dimensions than his eyes could perceive. The wrapped handle was simple cloth, worn smooth by age but showing no signs of decay. The material should have rotted away millennia ago, but it remained intact, preserved by forces beyond normal understanding. Taeyang reached out slowly, and something strange happened. The moment his fingers were within a few inches of the handle, the runes brightened. The blue light intensified, pulsing faster, and a low hum filled the chamber. It was a sound felt more than heard, resonating in bones and blood. Behind him, he heard sharp intakes of breath. The crowd sensed something different was happening, though what that difference meant remained unclear. His hand closed around the handle. The sensation was immediate and overwhelming. It wasn't just touch. Information flooded into his mind, too fast to process consciously, but somehow familiar despite its alien nature. Star charts, technical specifications, languages he didn't know but somehow understood, and underneath it all a sense of recognition, like meeting someone he'd known long ago but had forgotten. The sword felt light in his hand, not weightless but balanced perfectly, as if it had been made specifically for his grip. The blade seemed to sing, a note too high for human hearing but somehow perceived nonetheless. "Impossible," Praxis 9's voice said, and for the first time there was emotion in it. Shock. Taeyang lifted the sword from the pedestal. It came away easily, smoothly, without resistance. He held it up and the blade blazed with light that filled the entire chamber. The runes covering its surface burned like blue fire, and the darkness of the chamber retreated before their radiance. The crowd erupted in chaos, shouts of disbelief, cries of wonder, arguments breaking out as delegates tried to make sense of what they were seeing. Brixtal stood frozen, his mouth open in an expression of complete shock. Taeyang barely heard any of it. He was staring at the sword in his hand, at the light playing across its surface, at the runes that now seemed to spell out words in a language he was just beginning to remember. "Light as always," he murmured, the words coming from somewhere deep in his memory, not his personal memory but something older, something inherited. The blade responded to his voice, its light intensifying until everyone in the chamber had to shield their eyes. When the brightness finally faded, Taeyang stood in the center of the chamber, holding the impossible sword. While the galaxy's representatives stared at him in stunned silence, Praxis 9 spoke, its voice filled with something that might have been awe or fear. "In 50,000 years you are the first. The sword has found its inheritor at last." The station hung in the void like a jewel against the darkness. Omega Threshold was the largest structure ever built by the combined efforts of 1,000 worlds. Its gleaming corridors stretched for hundreds of miles, and its central chamber could hold representatives from every known species in the galaxy. Today it did exactly that. Taeyang stood near the back of the assembly hall watching the spectacle unfold before him. As Earth's ambassador, he had attended many council meetings over the past 3 years, but nothing compared to the Centennial Summit of Unity. The chamber was a riot of colors, sounds, and smells. Beings of every imaginable shape moved through the crowd. Some walked on legs, others floated, and a few seemed to exist in states of matter that defied easy description. Next to him, Hana adjusted her datapad, her eyes scanning the crowd with academic interest. She was technically his advisor, but Taeyang valued her for far more than her title suggested. Where he dealt with politics and diplomacy, she understood history and context. Together they made a good team. "Do you see the Velmora delegation?" Hana asked, nodding toward a cluster of insectoid beings near the front. Their crystalline exoskeletons caught the light and threw rainbow patterns across the walls. "Hard to miss them," Taeyang replied with a slight smile. The summit was called to order by Chancellor Brixtal, a massive reptilian whose scales seemed to shift between green and gold depending on the light. His voice boomed through the chamber without need for amplification, a natural resonance that commanded attention. "We gather as we have for 10,000 years, Brixtal announced, to celebrate unity, to resolve disputes, and to honor the ancient traditions that bind us together." The crowd settled into an attentive silence. Taeyang had learned that for all their differences, the species of the galaxy shared a deep respect for ceremony and ritual. Perhaps that was the only thing holding such a diverse collection of worlds together. "This year," Brixtal continued, "we have a special exhibition. The Sword of Kalthos will be displayed in the Chamber of Trials. As tradition dictates, any who wish may attempt to claim it." A murmur ran through the crowd. Taeyang leaned toward Hana. "What's special about this sword?" Hana's eyes lit up the way they always did when she got to share knowledge. "It's one of the great mysteries of the galaxy. The sword has been around for at least 50,000 years, maybe longer. According to legend, it can only be lifted by someone worthy, but no one has ever succeeded. Every species has sent their greatest warriors, their strongest champions, their most noble leaders. All have failed. What happens when they try? The sword simply won't move. It sits on its pedestal like it's part of the station itself. Some of the strongest beings in the galaxy have tried. Creatures that can pull starships with their bare hands. Warriors who have crushed planets. None of them could even make it wobble. Taeyang studied the crowd with renewed interest. He could see the eager expressions on many faces, the challenge already accepted in their minds. Strength was valued in the galaxy, perhaps more than anything else. Humanity's relatively weak physical form had been a source of quiet mockery since they joined the galactic community 80 years ago. The ceremony continued with various announcements and acknowledgments. Treaties were signed, disputes were mediated, and honors were bestowed. Through it all, Taeyang noticed a pattern. Whenever a human delegation was mentioned, there were subtle reactions. A shifting of weight, a turning away, small gestures of dismissal that spoke volumes. It wasn't overt discrimination. The council was too civilized for that. But humanity was still seen as the newcomers, the weak ones. The species that had barely left their own solar system when the rest of the galaxy had been traveling the stars for millions of years. When the formal proceedings ended, delegates began to mingle. Taeyang found himself approached by several representatives, each offering polite conversation that barely masked their curiosity. Humans were still novel enough to be interesting, if not quite respected. Ambassador Taeyang, a musical voice said behind him. He turned to find Velmora herself, the scholar who led the insectoid delegation. Her compound eyes reflected his image 100 times over. "Will any of your people attempt the sword trial?" Before he could answer, Brixtal's heavy footsteps announced his approach. The massive reptilian chancellor loomed over both of them, though he directed his attention to Velmora. "An interesting question, though I wonder if humans have the strength for such endeavors." "No offense intended, Ambassador." Taeyang kept his expression neutral. He had dealt with far more direct insults during his military career. "None taken, Chancellor." "After all," Brixtal continued, clearly warming to his subject, "the sword has defeated champions who could tear through starship hulls. I believe humans require tools even to open sealed containers, yes?" A small crowd was gathering now, drawn by the Chancellor's voice and the promise of entertainment at humanity's expense. Taeyang felt Hana tense beside him, but he remained calm. This was the dance of galactic politics. Every slight was carefully calculated, every insult wrapped in courtesy. "We do rely heavily on our tools," Taeyang acknowledged. "It served us well enough so far." Indeed, Brixtal said, though his tone suggested he thought otherwise. "No shame in knowing one's limitations. Perhaps your species has other strengths to contribute to the Council." The implication was clear. Humanity might have technology and cleverness, but when it came to real power, they were lacking. It was an old argument, one Taeyang had heard in various forms since taking his position. "I would like to attempt the trial," Taeyang said quietly. The conversation around them stopped. Brixtal's eyes widened slightly, the first genuine expression of surprise Taeyang had ever seen on his face. "You?" the Chancellor asked. "If permitted by Council tradition. My understanding is that any delegate may make the attempt." Velmora's antennae twitched with what might have been amusement or excitement. "This is correct. Any delegate who wishes may enter the Chamber of Trials." Brixtal seemed to consider this. Then a slow smile spread across his face. "Of course. We would be honored to witness a human attempt. Perhaps you will surprise us all, Ambassador." The tone made it clear he expected nothing of the sort. Around them, word was already spreading through the crowd. A human was going to attempt the sword trial. It would be entertaining, if nothing else, a brief diversion before the summit continued with more important matters. Taeyang simply nodded his thanks. Beside him, Hana whispered, "Do you know what you're doing?" He looked toward the distant chamber of trials, visible through the transparent sections of the station's hull. "Not entirely," he admitted. "But something about that sword feels familiar. I can't explain it. Familiar how? Like a memory I can't quite reach. Like something I should know." He turned back to the crowd, to the faces watching him with curiosity and poorly hidden contempt. "I guess we'll find out soon enough." The summit dissolved into smaller gatherings, but the talk was all about the coming trial, a human, attempting what the galaxy's greatest champions had failed to achieve. Some found it bold, others found it foolish, but everyone wanted to watch. In the void beyond the station, Stars burned as they had for billions of years, indifferent to the small dramas of the creatures that crawled between them. But perhaps if stars could pay attention, they might have noticed something stirring in the ancient corridors of Omega Threshold, something that had been waiting for a very long time.